Welcome to the intersection of Black culture and horticulture with your girl, Cola B talking. And guess what, y'all? We Black in the garden. From WABE Studios, welcome to Black in the Garden, the intersection between Black culture and horticulture. I'm your host, Cola B talking. Today, I have my co-host joining me, who you may know from tuning into the show before, Joshua, aka Plant Zaddy.
Yes, hello everyone. So good to be here again.
We have a very fun story to dive into, a unique subject matter and person. We're going to be talking about topiary. But first, let me ask you, have you ever heard of the artist Pearl Fryar?
I have not, and I can say that confidently.
All right, so he is one of the first highly acclaimed plant people that ever crossed my desk back in 2019. I was actually in Columbia, South Carolina, same state as Pearl, and I came across this documentary called A Man Named Pearl. And it was a very affirming moment for me because it made me realize that there is a lot of space, just so much space for us to create media that highlights Black people, not just loving plants, but in doing so, making a real impact in the world. Mm-hmm. Isn't that?
I mean, I think that's something that we all want to do and aspire, in whatever realm or business that we have. But plant specifically, it's very good to hear that someone is out there doing that and making that space for us.
Yeah. And I think about how you like to make an impact in the world.
Absolutely.
And the way that you want to make an impact in the homes of the people that you provide plants to.
Yeah. And I know we're going to get into topiary. I do know what that is. But I've always seen plants as living art.
Yeah.
And that means that we're actually taking them for the way that they are rather than sculpting and doing all those other things.
Right.
So, it's an intersection between both, but two completely different things.
Yeah. I like how the plant as it is, like you say it, like when we just get the plant in its natural form, we get to enjoy it because that's kind of part of the appeal for us when we are more selective about certain plants over others. And so when we think about sculpting plants, then we're kind of getting into the manipulation of it, using it as a medium. Have you ever actually sculpted a plant yourself?
I would say when I think of sculpting, it's more so, using your hands and shaping and molding and things of that nature.
Clay?
So, yeah. So I have sculpted a bonsai tree.
Okay.
In terms of allowing it to grow in the shape that I wanted to, but there were no scissors in my hands.
One name in the topiary world truly rises above the rest, which is Pearl Fryar, because his story is going to have you looking at your hedges with fresh and new eyes. Pearl took a very simple pair of shears and he transformed his South Carolina yard into a masterpiece that would inspire people all over the world.
Wow. That is amazing to have a piece of art in front of your house, and it's all natural.
All up in your yard.
Wow.
You can see that a lot of his sculptures were taller than his house. So they were definitely of scale. So when you think of shaping plants, though, let's go back to what you actually do think about. What comes to mind first?
The funny thing, a movie came to mind.
Yes.
A movie and a man. Edward Scissorhands.
Edward Scissorhands.
Kind of comes to mind. He went around doing what he needed to do.
I love that movie. I grew up on that movie. He was having a very positive impact on everybody around him. He was even cutting the people's hair. Did you saw the movie?
Absolutely.
The art form that we're talking about that brings that kind of plant sculpting to life is called topiary. All right. So picture this. You go out into the yard, approach a simple bush or maybe a shrub, a dense little something. You shape it into anything from animals to swirling abstract forms, kind of like what we saw in the movie.
Correct.
Yeah. And I mean, the people were getting so excited because it's like, wow, what can't you do with these scissors in transforming it into something else? I know that was a part of the magic for me. Topiary is about turning nature into living and breathing art. And I guess it's that living, breathing aspect that makes it so exciting. It's been around since Roman times and it has evolved over the centuries. But Pearl Fryar did not always have shears in hand. Joshua, where do you think that Pearl started before he became a topiary master?
When you were just speaking about, the background, I feel like it all has to start here, as a creative.
I like where you're going. That's good logic.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
But
Well, you might not expect it, but Pearl actually started as a factory engineer for Coca-Cola in
okay.
Bishopville, South Carolina.
Okay.
So he was working in the factory. I know many people can relate. Somebody probably listening to this at the job right now. So he moved there in 1981, and that's when things took a very interesting turn. He faced challenges from neighbors who doubted if he would be able to keep up his yard. And little did they know, Pearl was about to show them how wrong they were. I love proving people wrong.
I do too.
When they think I'm not going to get it.
That's a special thing to do.
So Pearl's way of proving them wrong was legendary. What he did was he didn't just maintain his yard. He started by rescuing discarded plants from local nurseries, and he brought them back to life. So, I mean, I love being on a budget and going and finding a little clearance plant that's about to die.
Definitely. Yeah, well, I think in tapping into Pearl, and I think what his thought process was, is wanting to challenge himself. And not just taking on something that is easy, but how can I learn from it? How can I help it grow? And then from there, we know that he started to, really use his hands and chopping things up and making things into art.
Yeah.
But I think it probably was, how can I start from ground zero?
He brought them back to life.
Yes.
He shaped them into something new, something stunning, something abstract, art. So his goal was to win the local Yard of the Month award. But he ended up creating something far more memorable. I mean, Yard of the Month, that's just a month.
Definitely.
But
But it takes a long time to get there, though.
It takes a while to get there, but it's just a month. So he just took it from like a month to a legend, a lifestyle, a lifetime. So Joshua, when you think of topiary, what comes to mind? Are you imagining cute little animal shapes or something maybe that you've seen down to the botanical garden?
Well, I definitely have seen animal shapes. And I think that's something that people just expect now when they, think of shaping a plant. But I love to see abstract. And I hope that's where, he was going in terms of, okay, good.
He definitely
because that's something that will turn people's eye and then also say, what am I going to see when I come back? Rather than just a green jungle full of animals.
Pearl Fryar was definitely not shy about using abstract art in the medium that he chose, being shrubbery and plants. Most people think of traditional animal shapes or geometric forms, but Pearl's style is wild. It's free-flowing. It's organic. His most famous pieces are called the Fishbone Tree. He has another one called Love, Peace, and Goodwill. And they're not just plants, but they represent symbols.
Okay.
Pearl poured his heart into each piece. He often was working late into the night.
I can imagine.
He was obsessed, and I can relate to this because I remember when I first started gardening, he would go out in the middle of the night and he would have his car, he would get the headlights and he would shine them on the topiary like 2 a.m.
You got to do what you got to do to get it done.
He's out there with the car light shining on his creations, just trying to get it done. He's like, well, look, the sun has gone down, but my creativity is still very much shining brightly.
And why not do it at a time where no one's watching? So then you're going to wow people when you wake up. And then the other thing that came to mind when thinking of Pearl is in his creations, and the reason why I think he probably chose his creations the way he did is why stay safe. At this point, I don't want to just do animals. I want to do probably what I see in my head and project it on a plant, the way that it's going to be shaped.
In 1985, 4 years after he started, Pearl finally won that Yard of the Month award. But by then, he had already created something that would inspire generations. Like he was already on. He didn't need them. What do you think it takes to turn something as simple as a garden into a movement?
The first thing that comes to my mind is passion and also having a purpose within. Because I think after 4 years of not getting what you want and you keep going, you have to have some sort of passion and purpose behind it, because at that point you're doing it for you and potentially, something later on down the line, but it's really personal.
He didn't just create a garden, but Pearl created a movement. People from all over the world came to see his topiaries, to South Carolina, no less. and Pearl became a local hero. He was showing how passion and perseverance can transform your world. And here's a fun fact. His local Waffle House, they named something on the menu after him. Like the thing that he would always order. You know how like the celebrities do that now with the fast food chains?
Absolutely.
He been did
that. Was his signature dish.
Well, you must know that Pearl's story certainly does not end there. His influence spread far beyond the garden that he started. So enter Mike Gibson. He's someone who was deeply inspired by Pearl's work and who has helped to carry on the legacy of what Pearl started.
I don't know who Mike Gibson is.
So he actually began working with Pearl during the summers when he was a young man, because his dad told him once Mike ended up getting interested in topiary as a result of his dad making him cut the grass, and just doing a lot of that landscaping, just regular suburban kind of like yard work. So in picking up a pair of shears, Mike Gibson got into topiary when he was young. And when his dad recognized that he was into that art form, he encouraged him to look into Pearl Fryar. And Mike was like, oh, who's that lady?
As most of us would
have. You know, that's why the documentary is called A Man Named Pearl. So once he found out about Pearl, and he was very inspired to see someone that looked like him doing that thing, that was, as you can imagine, something he may not have imagined he would find a Black man doing. That was how he ended up getting connected, and his dad would actually take him down to South Carolina from Ohio. They lived in Ohio, and he got to actually learn from Pearl. So in learning from him, he would go back to Ohio, and he eventually started his own landscaping business. And he actually took that to the next level. Between the business aspect and the artistry of it all, he made it onto HGTV. He got to show off his topiary skills. It was a competition. He didn't win, but he definitely made a big splash in the competition. It wasn't really about the fame for him. It wasn't even really about winning, but it was more so about securing his business, you know, securing the bag. He had a family to take care of. Mike always stayed connected to Pearl, though. As you can imagine, you know, that's like his mentor.
Exactly.
Right. So in 2021, Mike decided to go down to South Carolina and check in on Pearl and, you know, make sure the garden was good. But when he arrived in South Carolina, he was shocked at what he found, because Pearl had gotten old and he had unfortunately fallen seriously ill. And so the garden had been neglected for a bit of time. And Mike Gibson came in to do just that. And, you know, there were some landscapers that were around that were trying to keep it going, but it was really clear to those who were not really trained in it or passionate about it that the garden was in trouble and it needed
some tending to.
It needed some tending to by some skilled hands.
I think that probably was very heartbreaking for Mike when he pulled up to the house, seeing that.
Yeah.
Because I could only imagine someone teaching me a skill that they, you know, have mastered, and it basically just withering away. And the plants were a direct representation of that.
Yeah. That not just that legacy, but like that thing that they have in common, that thing that sparked him, that really inspired him to know that he could take his craft to another level. I'm getting a little emotional just thinking about it.
But I think that's where the value of following your passion and purpose, because you never know how you might get somebody else to their next step as well, or help somebody else really see what their passion is. And then at the end of the day, it's a full circle moment.
Mike he didn't just walk away. He came, he saw what was going on. He understood the magnitude of it. He jumped right in to help them to restore the garden. He actually got to meet with some key figures from the McKissick Museum and also from the Atlanta Botanical Garden, some key stakeholders who were aware of the legacy and the need for preservation of that space. It's very important on this podcast, Black in the Garden, the concept of preservation, because our stories about these types of spaces, this was at his house, mind you. Like, he didn't set out on some fancy estate to start a garden that people were going to come from around the world to see, but he started it because, you know, he had something to prove, but then his passion overtook him. So for them to come and recognize the need to preserve that, very good, very special. So shout out to the McKissick Museum and the Atlanta Botanical Garden, who, friends of the show. And they were already working on a plan when they reached out to bring the garden back to life. And after those discussions with Pearl, Mike became the topiary artist in residence at the beautiful Pearl Fryar Topiary Garden.
That is a beautiful story.
Official, very official. Mike moved his entire family down to South Carolina from Ohio. He actually proposed to his wife before, they got married, obviously. He proposed to her on that ground. And that was a massive project. So the way that the whole family is kind of entwined, it's romantic.
Yeah, it's kind of like passing the torch.
Definitely pass the torch, because now Mike is helping to restore Pearl's garden to its former glory. But we really appreciate you, Mike, for keeping Pearl's legacy alive. I know you'll be watching this, and you're keeping it alive for future generations. We love that. It is amazing to see how Pearl's legacy has shaped not just the art of topiary, but also the people around him, and his influence is blooming in the next generation of artists. So, what can we take away from Pearl's story?
Well, I would say in myself, I see a lot of resemblance and similarities with Pearl and myself, because, I have a corporate background. He was an engineer, and it takes a special mind to be an engineer regardless. So to follow a passion and make it into something that at the end of the day turned into something that was historic takes determination. And also, like I said, it's very important to notice the space that you're in and how representation matters.
Yeah. Because
Mike wouldn't have probably got to where he was in the fashion that he did if Pearl did not stay fast on the track that he was on. So I would definitely say that it's really following your passion and purpose and remaining determined to get to the end goal. And sometimes you don't know what the end goal is, but that's why you got to keep your left foot in front of the right and just keep going and keep going.
I can't imagine that Pearl set out to create a topiary legacy.
An engineer would never do that. It was not purposeful.
Yeah, he started out, working for Coca-Cola. I love that you latched on to the fact that he was an engineer. That's a kind of like a different way of thinking. But I love when engineers get into artistry, because they do it and
take it to another level.
They really because they can scale.
Yes.
But I don't want to get too deep into that. I'm gonna tell you what I'm taking away from this. I'm thinking about the growth, the growth that comes from nurturing what's inside of us. It's a reminder that our cultural identity can transform not just our surroundings, but our entire community. We've all got a bit of Pearl Fryar in us, a seed of creativity, a desire to grow, and the power to shape our world into something beautiful. So get out there, trim your hedges, because you never know what it could lead to, and let your creativity bloom. And with that, let's go into a watering moment.
Plant fam, let's take a moment to water our spirits with a lesson from Pearl Fryar's incredible story. So imagine looking at a discarded plant, something tossed aside, and instead of seeing it as waste, you see potential, a masterpiece in the making. Pearl didn't just rescue those plants, he nurtured them into living art, defying expectations and transforming his surroundings. Just like Pearl's topiaries, our lives are full of raw material waiting to be shaped. But see, it's easy to let others define our limitations, whether it's about where we can live or what we can achieve or even how we're seen. But here's the truth. Your garden, your life is yours to design. Pearl took a pair of shears and turned doubt into a garden of hope and creativity. So ask yourself, what are you ready to trim away? And what will you allow to grow in its place? The next time you face a challenge, think of Pearl working under the stars, headlights blazing, trimming until 2 a.m. That is dedication. But more than that, it's a belief in the vision only he could see. Water that belief in yourself, because like Pearl, you have the power to turn obstacles into opportunities, to take what others overlook and make it into something extraordinary. So let's keep pruning, shaping, and growing. Our lives, just like Pearl's Topiary garden, are living, breathing testimonies to what's possible when we cultivate with purpose and persistence. So stay creative, stay resilient, and let your garden of life bloom. And as always, plant fam, plant more and worry less. Plant Zaddy out.
Thank y'all for tuning into Black in the Garden. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on social media for more real-time updates, events, and community. And don't be shy.
Black in the garden. Black like the root of my hair, from the top of my head to the soles of my feet. Hey, yeah, black.